A blind billionaire forces a cleaner to read during a blackout and gets closer to her. He just needed someone to read to him. She just wanted to keep her job. But all it took was a blackout, a stranger's voice in the gloom, and everything inside him began to yield. She wasn't trying to captivate him, wasn't looking to be seen, but that was precisely why he couldn't stop listening. In the sound of her voice, the country's most impenetrable man found something he never expected, a sanctuary. And night after night, without realizing it, they were writing the most dangerous story of all, the one about a love that was never planned. Forgive the interruption to your story, but if you enjoy this type of content, please don't forget to subscribe. Bless this channel by helping us grow, and may that blessing be returned to you twofold. Thank you, and enjoy the video. A single bead of sweat trickled down the back of Maya's neck as she pushed the heavy cleaning cart down the corridor of the 48th floor of the Apex Hotel. The crisp autumn air of New York City swept through the grand windows of the luxurious skyscraper, but it did little to cool the deep-seated warmth in her muscles after 8 hours of relentless work. At 26, with 4 of those years spent at the hotel, Maya Suarez knew every opulent corner of the establishment, frequented by tech moguls, foreign dignitaries, and the silently wealthy. Her days were a meticulously timed ballet of efficiency. 15 suites cleaned, 30 sets of high thread count sheets changed, hundreds of miniature toiletries restocked, and a discreet, practiced smile maintained whenever she passed a guest in the hall. It was a life lived in the margins of other people's extravagance. She adjusted her cheap earbuds, turning up the volume. The soaring, ethereal voice of Florence Plaus. The machine was her constant companion, a private soundtrack that transported her far from this world of polished marble and hushed importance. It took her to a place where she didn't have to avert her gaze or make herself invisible. The music was her shield, her escape, but not even the most powerful crescendo could soothe the ache in her shoulders or erase the gnawing worry for her sick mother, waiting for her in their small apartment in Astoria, Queens. "Maya! Hey, Maya!" The sharp voice of Maria, her supervisor, sliced through the music. Maya yanked the earbuds out, stuffing them hastily into the pocket of her drab grey uniform. The rules were absolute. No distractions on the clock. Ever. "Sorry, Maria, I just finished the 48th. I was about to clock out. The power's out, the whole building," Maria interrupted, her face tight with a nervous energy that set Maya on edge. "The emergency generator is only running for the common areas and the top floor." A cold dread, sharp and sudden, washed over Maya. The top floor, the 49th, the forbidden floor, the floor where he stayed. "Mr. Croft is on the line. He says he needs urgent assistance." The color drained from Maya's face. Every staff member at the Apex spoke of the penthouse guest in hushed, almost mythical tones. Julian Croft, the blind tech visionary who had weaponized his disability, turning it into a superpower in the ruthless world of corporate acquisitions. The rumors were legendary. They said he could detect a lie by the subtle shift in a person's breathing. They whispered he'd fired an executive assistant on the spot for wearing a perfume that displeased him. They knew he demanded that every object in his environment remain in its precise, unchanging location. He was less a man and more a force of nature, one you prayed you'd never have to face. "But I've never been up there," Maya protested, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know his protocols." "It's an emergency, kid," Maria said, pressing a cool plastic key card into Maya's hand. "He says he needs someone to read something important to him. Room service is swamped, dealing with guests stuck in the elevators. You're the only one free." Maya's fingers, trembling slightly, closed around the card. Refusal wasn't an option. She needed this job. She needed the health insurance for her mother. She needed every single dollar of her paycheck and the occasional life-saving tips. This job was the thin line between staying afloat and drowning. The service elevator, humming on the generator's power, carried her upward into the lion's den. Unlike the rest of the hotel, which was plunged into a disorienting darkness, the hallway leading to the penthouse was faintly lit by emergency LEDs embedded in the floor, creating a stark, runway-like path to the floor's single, imposing door. She took a deep, shaky breath and slid the card through the reader. A green light blinked. The lock clicked with a sound that seemed to echo in the profound silence. The penthouse suite was an exercise in cavernous minimalism. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the space, offering a panoramic view of the now patchy New York skyline. A glittering tapestry with entire sections blacked out. The decor was stark, clean-lined furniture in neutral tones, and a conspicuous absence of any unnecessary decorative objects. Everything was obsessively, perfectly ordered, as if the space were a showroom, not a home. "Mr. Croft?" Maya called out, her voice quivering despite her best efforts to control it. "I'm from housekeeping." 19 seconds. A deep, masculine voice responded from somewhere in the gloom. "It took you 19 seconds from the moment you opened the door to the moment you decided to speak." Maya flinched, her heart hammering against her ribs. The voice emanated from a large armchair angled toward the windows. In the faint city glow, she could only make out the silhouette of a man sitting there, utterly still. "Fear has a particular sound, you know," the voice continued, smooth and unnervingly calm. "It's like a low hum, almost imperceptible. Footsteps become shorter, breathing becomes shallow." The man stood, turning to face her. Even in the dim light, his presence was commanding. He was tall and lean, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit. An angular, handsome face was partially obscured by a pair of sleek sunglasses, a strange accessory in the near-total darkness. "I'm sorry, sir. Maria told me you needed help with some reading," Maya managed, forcing a professional firmness into her tone. "Approach," he commanded. Maya moved forward, her steps small but deliberate. As she drew closer, more details emerged from the shadows. Raven black hair swept immaculately back, a perfectly trimmed beard defining a strong jawline, and a posture that was both erect and dominant, belying his condition. "There is a book on the table beside you," he said, gesturing to his right with millimeter precision. "I need you to read the chapter that's been marked. I have a meeting tomorrow, and my personal assistant is stranded at JFK because of the storm." Maya located the book. It was heavy, bound in dark leather, its pages marked with a crimson silk ribbon. "Sit there," Croft instructed, indicating an armchair near his own, "and take out your headphones. I can hear the music bleeding from them." Startled, Maya's hand flew to the pocket where she'd shoved her earbuds. Sure enough, she had forgotten to turn them off, and the faint, tinny whisper of a melody was escaping. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment. She sat where he'd directed and opened the heavy volume. It was a dense text on sustainable architecture, filled with technical jargon and complex references she could barely comprehend. "The integration of passive climate control systems," she began, her voice hesitant and thin. "Firmer," he cut in sharply. "You are not asking for permission to read. You are conveying valuable information. Read it as such." Maya swallowed hard, the command stinging like a slap. She centered herself, took another breath, and began again, this time infusing her voice with a confidence she did not feel. Word by word, paragraph by paragraph, she lost herself in the rhythm of the text. After a few minutes, her initial, paralyzing nervousness began to recede. The dimly lit room, the darkened cityscape beyond the glass, and the silent, imposing presence of the man beside her created a strange, intimate bubble, suspended outside of time. She had no idea how long she read. It could have been 30 minutes, or well over an hour. Her eyes began to ache from the strain of deciphering the small print in the low light, but she didn't dare stop. Mr. Croft listened with an unnerving stillness, his focus absolute. Occasionally he would nod slightly, or his brow would furrow at a particular passage. Suddenly the lights flickered once, twice, then flooded the room with a brilliant, steady glow. Across the city, the blacked-out patches on the skyline began to relight, one by one, until the metropolis was once again a dazzling constellation of light. "It seems the power is back," Maya said softly, closing the book. Julian Croft removed his sunglasses. He turned his head toward her, and for the first time she saw his eyes. They were a stunning shade of slate grey, framed by thick, dark lashes, beautiful, striking, and utterly vacant of expression. They looked through her, not at her. "Your voice," he said, after a long, unnerving silence. "There's something different about it." Maya was speechless. No one had ever said anything remarkable about her voice. It was just a voice. "What is your name?" he asked, his tone measured. "Maya Suarez, sir." "Maya." He repeated the name slowly, as if tasting each syllable. "Tomorrow, same time. There are more chapters I need to review." It wasn't a question. It was a decree, issued with the unshakable certainty of a man who did not know how to be denied. "But tomorrow isn't my shift on this floor, sir. I only clean floors 46 through 48. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Julian Croft's lips. Not anymore. As of tomorrow, your duties have changed. I will ensure your supervisor is informed. Maya nodded automatically, forgetting for a moment that the gesture was lost on him. Yes, sir, she finally replied. As the elevator descended, Maya realized she was clutching the heavy leather-bound book to her chest. Her hands were trembling again, but it was no longer from fear. It was something else entirely, something new, unsettling, and utterly impossible to name. The clock on her phone read 8:45 p.m. Maya's heart pounded a heavy rhythm against her ribs as the elevator ascended to the top floor once more. Tucked inside her bag was a well-worn paperback she'd bought at a used bookstore on her lunch break. It wasn't a treatise on architecture or global economics. It was a novel she loved, something worlds away from what she imagined Julian Croft would ever choose to read. The elevator doors slid open. The penthouse corridor was dim again, lit only by the floor-level emergency lights. A memo that morning had explained there would be scheduled rolling blackouts throughout the city center at night to repair the extensive damage from the previous day's storm. Tonight, Maya walked with a confidence that hadn't been there before. Her uniform had been changed. The drab housekeeping grey was gone, replaced by a tailored black ensemble with subtle gold accents, the uniform of the personal assistants assigned to VIP guests. Maria had handed it to her that morning with a look that was an unsettling cocktail of shock and envy. Mr. Croft specifically requested you be assigned to his service for the duration of his stay, she had said, her voice tight. He's never asked for a specific staff member before, not once. Reaching the penthouse door, Maya took a fortifying breath and slid the keycard. The door swung open silently. The interior was cast in shadow, illuminated only by the ambient glow of the city and several strategically placed flickering candles that cast long, dancing shadows on the walls. "You're 2 minutes early," Julian's voice emerged from the same armchair as the night before. "Punctuality is a rare virtue." "Good evening, Mr. Croft," Maya replied, still taken aback by his uncanny ability to sense her arrival. "The hotel's generator is running at minimum capacity," he explained as if reading her mind. "It's only powering essential systems. I've requested they not waste energy illuminating this suite." Maya approached, her eyes slowly adjusting to the intimate, candle-lit darkness. Julian's silhouette was carved against the diffuse radiance of the city below. He wasn't wearing the sunglasses tonight, and his grey eyes seemed to capture and reflect the distant lights, giving them a strange, liquid depth. "I brought a different book," she said, her voice softer than she intended, as she settled into her designated chair. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to continue with the architecture text." "What did you bring?" "Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck," she answered, a sudden wave of insecurity washing over her. "It's a novel, not a technical book. If you'd prefer the other one—" "I like Steinbeck," he interrupted, his tone gentler than it had been the day before. "Have you read it before?" "3 times, she confessed. "The first in high school, because I had to. The other 2, because I wanted to." A slight, genuine smile graced Julian's lips. "Then begin." Maya opened the paperback and started to read. Her voice, nervous at first, grew in confidence with each turn of the page. The tragic story of George and Lenny, of friendship and a desperate, doomed dream, came to life in the vast, shadowed suite. She was no longer just a cleaner. She was a storyteller, a conduit for the raw, aching humanity in Steinbeck's prose. Occasionally she would glance up at Julian. His face, usually an impenetrable mask, showed faint traces of emotion, a slight furrow of his brow during a tense moment, the ghost of a smile at a piece of ironic dialogue. Outside, the city breathed in light and darkness as the rolling blackouts moved across the boroughs. But inside the suite, time seemed to have stopped, suspended in an intimate bubble formed by Maya's voice and Julian's absolute, unwavering attention. After nearly an hour, Maya paused, her throat dry. "Would you like some water?" he asked instantly, sensing her discomfort. "Yes, please. There's a pitcher on the kitchen island. Help yourself." Maya rose and moved toward the open-plan kitchen, amazed at the perfect, intuitive layout of the space. She didn't need to turn on a light to find the pitcher and a glass. She poured the cool water and drank slowly, the relief spreading through her. From that vantage point, she could watch Julian. His profile against the window was statuesque, almost painfully inaccessible. What was the story behind those unseeing eyes? What was his life like beyond these silent, obsessively ordered walls? She returned to her seat and resumed the story, her voice carrying them toward the novel's inevitable, heartbreaking conclusion. Without realizing it, she had found a cadence that was almost musical, modulating her tone to match the emotional weight of every passage. "That's enough for tonight," Julian said quietly, when she finished a particularly intense chapter. Maya closed the book, resting it in her lap. The silence that settled between them was different now. It wasn't awkward like the previous night. It was expectant, charged, as if they both knew a subtle but significant shift had occurred. "Your voice," he began, his expression unreadable. "It has nuances I didn't notice yesterday." Nuances. When you read something that moves you, your voice takes on a different depth, he explained, his head tilted as if listening to an echo. "It's as if the words themselves have weight and texture." An unexpected warmth crept up Maya's neck and into her cheeks. No one had ever analyzed her, let alone her voice, with such precision. "Can I ask you something, Mr. Croft?" He nodded. "Why did you ask for me to come back? There are more qualified people on staff to assist you." Julian was silent for several long moments before he answered. "The day of the blackout, when you first entered this room, I sensed something different," he said finally. "Most people who surround me are governed by one of two things, fear or pity. I can hear it in their voices, a cloying sweetness or a nervous tremor. Your voice, it only held nervousness. There was no feigned pity." Just then, the lights across the city began to stabilize. The scheduled blackout in their district was over. The suite was gradually re-illuminated by the full incandescent glow of the metropolis, revealing details the candlelight had kept hidden. Julian's personal library, with hundreds of volumes in braille lining the shelves, framed photographs on a side table showing a younger Julian, smiling with eyes that could still see, and a magnificent grand piano occupying a far corner of the room. "You play?" Maya asked, gesturing toward the instrument. "I used to," he corrected. "I've lost the practice since—" He trailed off, cutting himself short as if he'd almost revealed too much. Maya glanced at her phone. It was nearly 11 p.m. "I should go," she said, standing up. "My mother worries if I'm late, and the last subway train leaves at 11:30. "I'll call you a car," he replied instantly, reaching for his phone. "It isn't safe at this hour." "That's not necessary, really." "I insist," he cut her off, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And tomorrow will you come at the same time?" Maya hesitated for a fraction of a second. Something was being woven in these nightly readings, something intangible but powerful. An invisible thread was connecting them through the words of others. "I'll bring another book," she answered finally. Julian smiled, a true, brilliant smile that completely transformed his severe features, making him look younger and unexpectedly vulnerable. "Surprise me," he said. As Maya left the suite, she felt as if she were leaving a small piece of herself behind. The elevator carried her back down to the ground floor, but her mind remained on the 49th, lost somewhere between the pages of Steinbeck and the grey eyes that couldn't see her, but which somehow perceived her more clearly than anyone ever had. Outside, the clamor of the New York City night welcomed her, but for Maya, everything had changed. An invisible thread, fragile yet astonishingly strong, now connected her to the 49th floor of the Apex Hotel. It was a thread woven from words, from shared silences, and from the strange, intoxicating sensation of being truly heard for the first time in her life. 3 weeks had passed since that first night, the night of the citywide blackout. Below, the Apex Hotel hummed along with its usual relentless rhythm. Tourists with their expensive luggage flowed through the lobby, executives brokered million-dollar deals over lunch in the Michelin-starred restaurant, and the staff moved like ghosts through the opulent corridors. But for Maya Suarez, the universe had tilted on its axis. Her entire existence had been reordered, pivoting around her nightly visits to the penthouse. Officially, her new designation was Mr. Croft's temporary personal assistant, a title that drew a constellation of curious glances and hushed whispers from her former colleagues. No one could comprehend why the blind billionaire, a man legendary for his impossible standards and glacial demeanor, had handpicked a simple housekeeper for such a role. "You must have some kind of secret charm, Maya," Brenda, another housekeeper, had said to her just that afternoon as they folded crisp linens on the 48th floor. "Either that or some of that old-world magic your grandma taught you, huh?" she added with a teasing laugh. Maya had simply smiled, a private, guarded expression. The truth was a delicate, complicated thing she kept locked away in her own heart. It was the knowledge that in those hushed, candlelit evenings, she had stumbled upon a connection that transcended job titles and pay grades, something she couldn't explain, even if she'd had the words for it. Tonight, as the elevator ascended in its silent, swift glide, she mentally rehearsed the routine that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. She would arrive at 9 p.m., not a minute before, not a minute after. Julian would be in the same place, seated in the dark leather armchair that faced the wall of windows, a silent sentinel overlooking the city. Sometimes classical music would be playing softly in the background. Debussy was his favorite, while other times he preferred the weight of absolute silence. Maya would read for an hour, and then they would pause for tea or coffee. Lately, those pauses had begun to stretch, blooming into conversations that drifted far from the pages of the books they shared. When she entered the penthouse, the scene was different. Julian was standing by the grand piano. His long, elegant fingers traced the smooth surface of the keys, hovering over them without making a sound, as if coaxing a phantom melody from the instrument's memory. "Good evening, Maya," he said, his voice calm and low without turning around. "How did you know it was me?" she asked. The question was almost a formality now. His uncanny ability to perceive her presence no longer surprised her, but it never failed to intrigue her. "Your perfume," he answered, a faint smile touching his lips. "Jasmine with a hint of citrus. It's subtle but unmistakable." Julian moved away from the piano and made his way to his customary chair. He was dressed in a dark grey suit, as immaculate as ever. Over the past 3 weeks, Maya had become a student of the small details that composed the man. She noticed the millimeter precision of his trimmed beard, the fluid, confident grace of his hands as they navigated the space he could not see, the subtle way the stern lines of his face would soften the moment she began to read. "What have you brought for us tonight?" he asked, his posture relaxed but attentive. "As I Lay Dying," by William Faulkner, Maya replied, pulling the worn paperback from her bag. "It's about a poor family's journey to bury their mother. It's intense." "Jai Faulkner," Julian murmured, a note of approval in his voice. "An American classic. I'm pleasantly surprised by your choice." Maya settled into what she now thought of as her chair, a seat positioned strategically near Julian's, but not too near. With every visit, the physical distance between them seemed to shrink, an imperceptible shift, as if a magnetic force were gently drawing them closer together against their will. She began to read. The dense stream of consciousness prose of Faulkner's opening lines filled the room, painting images of the rural, sun-scorched American South and the dark complexities of a family's grief. Maya's voice, which had once been so hesitant, now flowed with a newfound confidence. She navigated the shifting perspectives and challenging language with an intuitive grace, modulating her tone to capture the raw emotion, the desperation, and the bleak landscapes Faulkner described. Julian listened with that singular, total attention that was his hallmark. His face, usually a carefully controlled mask, became a canvas for the story's subtle shifts. Maya had learned to read him as she read her books. She recognized the slight furrow of his brow that signaled a tense passage, the barest hint of a smile that meant he appreciated a moment of dark, literary beauty. It felt as though his face was a private text, one that only she was being permitted to decipher. After 40 minutes, Maya paused, her throat feeling dry. The grim journey of the Bundren family had cast a heavy, somber atmosphere over the room. "Would you like some tea?" Julian offered, rising with the easy familiarity of someone who knows his environment by heart. "I had some jasmine tea brought up. I thought you might like it." "I'd love that, thank you." As Julian moved to the kitchenette area of the penthouse to prepare the tea, Maya's gaze drifted to the city sprawled below. New York was an endless, glittering ocean of light, under a sky hazed by clouds and ambition. From this impossible height, her own life, the unpaid bills piling up on the kitchen counter, the constant worry over her mother's health, the bone-deep exhaustion of her job, felt distant and small, as if they belonged to another person living on another planet. "Here," Julian's voice brought her back. He was holding out a delicate porcelain cup. "Be careful. It's hot." As she took it from him, their fingers brushed. The contact was fleeting, a whisper of touch, but it sent a startling jolt of electricity up her spine. She sat down again, and he took his seat. Their chairs angled slightly more toward each other than before. The silence between them was no longer a void to be filled, but a shared space, comfortable and intimate, like that between old friends who have no need for constant chatter. "May I ask you something personal?" Julian said after a moment, his voice a low murmur. "Of course." "Why do you keep coming back?" he asked, his tone laced with genuine curiosity. "You could have refused this arrangement after the first night, or you could simply read mechanically and leave. But you don't. Every night you pour something of yourself into the words." Maya considered the question, truly considered it. Why did she keep coming? Was it just for the significant pay bump that was easing the financial pressure at home? Was it the allure of this secret, hidden world? Or was it something deeper, something she hadn't yet dared to name, even to herself? "Because up here I get to be someone else," she answered at last, her voice soft but clear. "When I'm reading, I'm not the invisible housekeeper everyone looks through. I'm Addie Bundren. I'm Dewey Dell. I'm every character, every story." "And you—" She hesitated, her heart thumping. "You actually listen." Julian was quiet for a long time, processing her words. "Most people are afraid of me," he said finally. "My condition, my wealth, my reputation, they create barriers. But you, I'm not afraid of you," she finished for him, the words feeling truer than anything she'd ever said. Why not? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. "Because you listen to me," Maya repeated simply. "No one else does. To my family, I'm the provider, the one who pays the bills. To my colleagues, I'm competition. To the guests, I'm not even there. But when I read to you, I feel seen, or heard, I guess." Julian reached out his hand, a slow, deliberate movement into the space that separated them. After a brief, heart-stopping pause, Maya placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, a natural, perfect fit, as if they had been waiting for this moment since that first dark night. "This arrangement," he began, his voice softer than she had ever heard it, "it was meant to be temporary. My business here is concluded. My stay at the hotel ends in 2 weeks. I have to go back to Chicago." Maya felt a sharp, unexpected pang of loss. It was absurd. In just 3 weeks, these nightly readings had become the anchor of her life. "I understand," she said, struggling to keep her voice from betraying the sudden ache in her chest. "But I don't want it to end," he added, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand. "For the first time in years, I find myself looking forward to the night. Your voice, it has brought color into my darkness." Maya's world tilted again. Julian Croft's words were always so precise, so measured, but these words were different. They were raw, vulnerable, a confession that cracked open his carefully constructed facade. We should keep reading," she suggested, flustered, unsure how to respond to such a deeply personal revelation. Julian nodded, releasing her hand with a reluctance she could feel. Maya picked up the book again, but everything had changed. Every word now seemed to vibrate with a new subtext. Every pause was heavy with the things they weren't saying. When she finished the chapter, she closed the book silently. The clock on the mantelpiece showed 11:30 p.m., much later than her usual departure time. "I should go," she said, though every fiber of her being wanted to stay. "Tomorrow is Sunday," he reminded her. "I assume you won't be coming in." "I could," she heard herself offering, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "If you wanted, we could finish the book." The smile that spread across Julian's face was a revelation. It transformed him, erasing the shadows and illuminating a warmth she had never seen. "I would love that." As the elevator carried her back to the ground floor, Maya knew she had crossed a line. What had begun as a command and continued as a job had now morphed into something far more profound and infinitely more dangerous. It was something that didn't fit into the neat, orderly boxes of her life. And the most terrifying part was, she had no desire to turn back. The rainy season had descended upon New York with a vengeance. For 3 days, a relentless steel-gray torrent had lashed the city, turning streets into murky canals and swallowing the sky. Maya had woken up that morning with a raw, scratchy throat and a dull, throbbing pain behind her eyes. A low-grade fever came and went in waves, leaving her feeling weak and wrung out. Her mother, Guadalupe, had made her a steaming mug of mint tea with honey and lemon before she left for her own job. "Don't go in today, honey," she'd pleaded, placing the back of her hand against Maya's forehead. "With this flu and this weather, you're only going to make it worse." But Maya couldn't miss work. Not tonight. There were only 10 days left before Julian returned to Chicago. 10 more nights of reading, of quiet conversation, of shared silences. 10 days that felt more precious to her than her own physical comfort. "I'm fine, Ma," she lied, forcing a smile. "It's just a cold. Besides, I can't call out. Mr. Croft is depending on me." Guadalupe looked at her with the sharp intuition that only mothers possess. "Be careful, mija," she said finally, her voice soft. "And I'm not just talking about the weather." The journey to the hotel was a special kind of misery. The combination of the torrential downpour, the chaotic traffic, and the lurching of the crowded subway car amplified her sickness. By the time she finally stepped into the gleaming lobby of the Apex, she was soaked through despite her umbrella, and her head felt like it was about to split open. In the staff locker room, Brenda took one look at her and winced. "Geez, Maya, you look awful. Like a drowned rat," she said, her attempt at a joke failing to hide the genuine concern in her eyes. "You should go home." "I'm fine," Maya insisted, changing into the now familiar black and gold uniform. "The Ice King can survive one night without his bedtime story, you know," Brenda muttered, using the nickname the staff had given Julian for his cold, distant interactions with everyone. Maya didn't reply. How could she explain to Brenda that Julian wasn't the man they all thought he was? How could she describe the vulnerability that crept into his voice when he spoke of the past, or the profound warmth of his rare smile when she arrived each night? The clock read 8:55 p.m. when she stepped into the elevator. Her reflection in the mirrored walls gave her pause. Her cheeks were flushed with fever. Her eyes were overly bright, and her hair, though neatly tied back, looked limp and lifeless. She tried to clear her throat, but the effort only triggered a harsh, rattling cough. Upon entering the penthouse, she was met by the hypnotic sound of rain drumming against the vast windows. Julian was standing near the glass, his form silhouetted against the stormy, water-streaked skyline, as if he were watching the storm he couldn't see. "Good evening," Maya said, her voice raspy and weak. Julian spun around instantly, his brow furrowed in a deep frown. "You're sick." It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact. "It's just a small cold," she minimized, walking closer. "Nothing serious. Your voice is different. It's deeper, strained, and your footsteps are slower than usual." Maya was, as always, astonished by the sheer power of his perception. It was in moments like these that it was easy to forget he couldn't see her at all. "Really, She couldn't finish the sentence. A violent coughing fit seized her, doubling her over as she covered her mouth with her arm. Julian closed the distance between them in 3 long, confident strides, guided by the sound. With startling precision, his hand found her arm, then moved up to her forehead. His touch was a shock against her feverish skin. "You're burning up," he said, his voice now tight with concern. A high fever. It was the first time he had ever touched her with such deliberate intent. His hand was warm and firm against her skin, and it sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with her illness. "You shouldn't have come," he continued, a mixture of authority and worry in his tone. "Not in this weather, not in this condition. It's reckless." "I didn't want to miss a night," she confessed in a small voice. "The days are going by too fast and soon you'll be—" She trailed off, unable to articulate the dread she felt at the thought of his impending departure. He seemed to understand. The hard lines of his face softened. "Come," he said, taking her hand gently. "We're not reading tonight." He led her to the large plush sofa that dominated the living area. Then he moved to a handsome wooden cabinet and returned with a soft cashmere blanket. "Lie down," he instructed. "I'm going to make you some tea." "But Mr. Croft, you don't have to—" "Julian," he interrupted firmly. "After all this time, I think you can call me by my name." The sound of the rain intensified, drumming a constant rhythm against the glass. From the sofa, Maya watched Julian move around the kitchen with practiced confidence. His every action was precise, calculated, born of memory and repetition. In a few minutes, he returned with a steaming mug. "Ginger tea with honey and lemon," he explained, handing it to her. "My go-to when I travel to colder climates." Maya took the mug, letting its warmth seep into her chilled hands. "Thank you, Julian." Saying his name aloud felt momentous. It created a new kind of intimacy between them, as if they had just crossed another invisible frontier. He sat down on the sofa beside her, closer than he ever had before. The cushion dipped with his weight, causing her to lean imperceptibly toward him. "You don't need to read," he said softly. "We can just sit here, listen to the rain." And so they did. For the first time since their meetings began, there were no books, no printed words to mediate their interaction. There was only the steady, percussive sound of the storm, the occasional distant rumble of thunder, and the sound of two people breathing, their rhythms slowly, unconsciously, finding a shared cadence. The fever made Maya feel hazy and disconnected from reality, as if she were floating. The hot tea, the soft blanket, and Julian's quiet, reassuring presence beside her created a sense of profound safety she hadn't felt in years. "How did you lose your sight?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. She immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have you." "It's all right," he reassured her. "It was 8 years ago. A car accident on a highway during a storm much like this one. The car hydroplaned and—" He paused, his jaw tightening as if reliving it. "The loss wasn't immediate. It was a slow process. Weeks in the hospital, multiple surgeries. In the end, there was nothing more the doctors could do." "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "For the first year, I could see shadows, vague shapes," he continued, his unseeing eyes fixed on some point in the distance. "Then, nothing. I had to learn to live in a different world, to recognize people by their voices, the sound of their walk, their scent. I had to learn to trust my other senses." Instinctively, Maya reached for his hand. He laced his fingers through hers. "Sometimes," Julian confessed, his voice barely above a whisper, "I think I can see you. When you read, your voice paints such vivid pictures in my mind." Time seemed to dissolve. The rain, the sickness, the sprawling city outside, it all faded away, leaving only this moment of pure, unfiltered connection. With no books between them, no words written by another author, there was only the two of them, their voices, their hands intertwined in the quiet dark. When a soft chime from a clock in the room announced that it was 11, Maya realized she had to leave, though a part of her wanted to stay on that sofa forever, wrapped in the cashmere blanket and the warmth of Julian's presence. "I have to go," she said reluctantly. "I'll call a car," he replied, not letting go of her hand. They stood up at the same time, leaving them standing incredibly close to one another. Maya could smell his aftershave, a clean, sharp scent of citrus and wood. For a breathtaking moment, the world seemed to shrink to the tiny space between their bodies. "Take care of yourself," he murmured, finally releasing her hand, though his fingers lingered for a second longer than necessary. "And do not come in tomorrow, if you still have a fever. That's an order." Maya smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "Thank you for the tea, and for everything." As the elevator began its descent, taking her from the stratosphere of the 49th floor back to the reality of the ground, Maya leaned against the cool metal wall and closed her eyes. Something fundamental within her had been irrevocably altered, like a painstakingly constructed house of cards toppled by a single gentle breath. The barriers she had tried so desperately to maintain, employee and employer, reader and listener, two lives separated by the vast chasm of wealth and social standing, had disintegrated with a single caring touch. And in the ruins of those defenses, something new was beginning to grow. It was something terrifying and beautiful in equal measure. A week had passed since that rain-lashed night. Maya's flu had gradually subsided, but the phantom sensations of that evening lingered. The feeling of Julian's hand on hers, the palpable warmth of his concern, the profound intimacy they had shared in the quiet dark. Now, every night when she read to him, she felt the words themselves take on new layers of meaning, as if the English language itself had been reconfigured into a private dialect only they could understand. Only 3 days remained before Julian's departure for Chicago. 3 days, 24 hours each, that Maya counted with a silent, mounting anguish she did her best to conceal. Tonight, as she stepped into the penthouse, she sensed an immediate shift. The lighting was even more subdued than usual, and in place of the customary arrangement of their separate armchairs, Julian had positioned 2 comfortable seats directly in front of the vast window, the city spread out beneath them, a silent, sprawling galaxy of light. "I brought something different tonight," Julian said, his voice emerging from the shadows before she could even offer a greeting. "It's on the table." Maya moved closer and found a beautiful, antique book bound in worn, dark leather. Opening it, she discovered it was a collection of poetry. "Selected Poems by E. Cummings," she read on the title page. "Cummings is one of my favorite poets," Julian commented, settling into one of the armchairs. "My mother used to read his poems to me when I was a child." Maya sat across from him, the book feeling warm and alive in her hands. The mention of his mother, a subject Julian rarely ever approached, was a clear signal that this night would be different from all the others. "There's a poem I've marked," he directed her. "Page 47. Maya found the page, the thin paper soft beneath her fingertips. The poem was one she knew, one she loved. It was, "I carry your heart with me. I carry it in." She began to read, her voice a soft current in the quiet room, letting each unconventional line and parenthesis breathe. "I carry your heart with me. I carry it in, my heart. I am never without it, anywhere. I go, you go, my dear. And whatever is done by only me is your doing, my darling." As she progressed through the poem, her voice found a special depth, a resonant sincerity. She wasn't merely reciting the words. She was inhabiting them, feeling the weight of each sentiment, the delicate dance of each pause and breath between the verses. She glanced at Julian as she read. His face, normally a mask of calm control, showed the faintest cracks in its composure. His lips moved almost imperceptibly, as if he were reciting the beloved lines along with her. His hands, usually so steady, rested on the arms of the chair, his fingers subtly restless. When she finished the final line, "I carry it in my heart," the silence that followed was thick with unspoken emotion, a silence that, much like the one Cummings described, was its own form of language. "My mother had a voice like yours," Julian said at last, his own voice quiet and thick with memory, melodious but with character. When she read poetry, it was as if the words became tangible things, alive in the room. Maya remained silent, sensing that this was a door he had to open on his own, that he needed to speak. "She read to me every single night," he continued, his unseeing gaze fixed on a point in the distant past. "Even when I was a teenager and pretended I was too cool for it, she would come into my room with a book of poetry or a novel. She never gave up on it." He paused, the city lights reflecting meaninglessly in his grey eyes. "After the accident, when I was in the hospital, fighting to hold on to the last fading remnants of my sight, I asked her to read to me. Her voice was the only thing that kept me anchored to the world during those months of darkness and pain." "What happened to her?" Maya asked, her voice gentle. "She passed away 5 years ago, a sudden heart attack." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. "After she was gone, no one else read to me. I have audiobooks, of course, screen readers that convert text to a synthetic voice, but it's not the same. Those artificial voices don't breathe with the words. They don't feel what they're reading. They're just data." A tightness formed in Maya's chest. In that moment, she understood the profound depth of what these nightly sessions meant to him. This wasn't just about information or entertainment. It was a bridge to a lost past, a lifeline to an intimacy that had been violently stolen from him. "When I heard you that first night during the blackout," Julian searched for the right words. "It was as if something that had been dormant for years began to stir. Your voice wasn't just sound. It had life. It had a soul." Without thinking, compelled by an instinct she didn't try to analyze, Maya leaned forward and gently placed her hand over his on the armrest. "What you lost that day," she said, finding courage in the dim, shared space. "It wasn't just your sight, was it? It was the hope of being seen, truly seen." Julian turned his hand over, his fingers intertwining with hers. His touch was warm and certain. "How do you know that?" he asked, his voice a whisper. "Because I also know what it's like to be invisible," she replied, "to walk through the world like a shadow that nobody really notices." Slowly, Julian stood, drawing her up with him without letting go of her hand. With a precision born of weeks of listening to her every movement, he raised his free hand and brought it to her face. His fingertips, exquisitely sensitive, traced the line of her cheek, the curve of her temple, the shape of her jaw, as if he were a sculptor trying to memorize his creation in the dark. "And you, Maya Suarez," he murmured, his thumb brushing lightly against her lips. "Why do you hide? Why do you spend your days cleaning up what other people leave behind?" His touch was as light as a whisper, yet it coursed through her with an overwhelming intensity. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the sensation of being discovered. "My mother got sick when I was 18, she answered, her voice low. "I was just about to start college. I had a full scholarship to study literature at Columbia. But we needed the money, and more importantly, we needed the health insurance. The Apex offered both." She took a deep, shaky breath. "I told myself it would only be temporary, just until she was better. But the years went by, and temporary became permanent. She didn't add the rest. How she had buried her own dreams under the crushing weight of responsibility. How she had perfected the art of invisibility to avoid the pity or, worse, the condescension of the hotel's wealthy patrons. "So your hands are calloused from work," Julian observed, his fingers now gently tracing the lines on her palm. "But your mind is that of a voracious reader, a lover of words." "How do you know that?" she whispered back, mirroring his earlier question. "From the way you read, from the books you choose, from the infinitesimal pauses you make at certain passages, as if you're savoring a particularly beautiful phrase before sharing it. You don't just read the words, you taste them." Maya felt the last of her carefully constructed walls crumble into dust. Every excuse she had ever made for herself, every justification for abandoning her ambitions, dissolved under the perception of this man who, without ever seeing her face, saw her more clearly than anyone ever had. "I'm afraid," she confessed, the admission barely audible. "Of what?" he asked. He was so close now that she could feel his warm breath against her forehead. "Of wanting this," she answered with brutal honesty. "Of letting this, whatever is happening between us, grow. Because in 3 days you'll be gone, and I'll go back to being the invisible housekeeper." Julian cradled her face between his hands, his touch full of a tenderness that stood in stark contrast to his usual reserved demeanor. "Come with me to Chicago," he said, the words simple, direct, and earth-shattering. "There's a place for you in my foundation. We're building a new wing, a state-of-the-art library for the visually impaired. We need people to help curate it. We need voices like yours to lead our audio recording program. We need minds that understand the true power of words." The offer hung in the air between them, as unexpected and as electrifying as the first time their hands had touched. "But my job here." "Your mother can receive world-class medical care in Chicago. I will see to it personally. And as for your job," he paused, his meaning clear and profound. "Isn't it time you stopped cleaning up after others and started building something of your own?" Maya didn't answer with words. Instead, she lifted her own hand and, with trembling fingers, began to trace the features of his face, mimicking his earlier exploration. She mapped the arch of his eyebrows, the strong line of his cheekbones, the firm set of his jaw. It was her way of telling him that, for the first time in nearly a decade, she felt truly seen. And in that silent, reciprocal touch, there was an unspoken promise of a future that just a month ago, neither of them could have ever dared to imagine. Julian's offer resonated between them like a sustained chord, a bridge to a future that was as terrifying as it was tantalizing. Maya hadn't given him a definitive answer. "I need time," she had told him. And he, with the profound patience of a man who has learned to navigate darkness, had simply replied, "You have until Friday. It's all the time I can give you. 2 nights left. 2 more sessions before his private jet would carry him away to Chicago. 2 more chances to decide if she would continue to erase the traces of others or finally dare to leave her own." On this particular May evening, a sultry heat had settled over New York, the kind that makes the air feel thick and tangible as the asphalt radiates the day's absorbed warmth. Maya arrived at the hotel with a fluttering heart. The offer had been replaying in her mind all day, a constant loop of possibilities and fears. Her mother had noticed her distraction at breakfast. "Something's on your mind, Mija," she'd said, watching her stir an untouched cup of coffee. "Your eyes are here, but your head is 1,000 miles away." She was right. Her head was on the 49th floor of the Apex Hotel, with the man who made her feel more visible than anyone had with fully functioning eyes. As she stepped out of the elevator, she noticed something different. A soft, sweet fragrance of jasmine permeated the corridor. When her keycard opened the penthouse door, the scent intensified. Dozens of small, aromatic candles were arranged around the room, their flickering flames creating an intimate, almost ceremonial ambience. Julian was waiting for her by the window. He was wearing a light grey suit, a departure from his usual dark attire. There was a tension in his posture, an air of expectation she had never seen in him before. "Good evening, Maya," he greeted her as the door clicked shut. Punctual, as always. "The scent, it's beautiful," she commented, her senses captivated. "Jasmine," he confirmed with a small smile. "It reminded me of your perfume. I wanted tonight to be special." On the side table, next to her usual chair, sat a steaming porcelain cup. "I made you green tea with mint," he explained. "I know it's your favorite." Maya was deeply moved by the gesture. In these few short weeks, Julian had been studying her in his own way, memorizing the small, insignificant details that even she barely noticed. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick. I also brought something different tonight." From her bag, she pulled out a slim volume with a worn blue cover. "It's The Turn of the Screw by Henry James," she announced. "It's a short novel, but very intense. It's about memory, ghosts, and the things that haunt us." They settled into their chairs, though tonight Julian had moved his own even closer to hers. The space between them had dwindled to almost nothing, both physically and emotionally. Maya began to read, her voice clear and steady. The opening lines of the Gothic tale immediately cast a hypnotic, enveloping spell over the room. The story of the young, hopeful governess arriving at the isolated country estate, her mysterious employer, and the unnerving beauty of the two children drew them both into a world where reality itself seemed to bend and warp. As the narrative deepened, Maya felt a change in her own voice. It was as if the story was possessing her, as if she were becoming part of the governess's terrifying, lonely journey. She reached a particularly poignant passage where the governess, utterly isolated, feels an overwhelming sense of love and fear for the children, a desperate need to protect them from an evil only she can perceive. The raw beauty and crushing loneliness of that moment struck an unexpected chord deep within Maya. Her voice faltered. A lump formed in her throat. The parallel between the governess's isolation and her own, two people from different worlds, bound together by an improbable, intense connection in a gilded cage, overwhelmed her. She tried to push through, but a tear escaped, then another, rolling silently down her cheeks. Julian shifted, instantly alert to the catch in her voice, the tremor in her breath. He leaned forward and, with the utmost delicacy, reached out to her face. His thumb intercepted a tear just below her eye. "You're crying," he murmured, his voice filled with a stunned tenderness. Maya couldn't speak. All the tension of the past few days, the weight of her pending decision, the fear of taking a risk, and the even greater fear of not taking it, crested and broke in that silent surge of tears. On impulse, she leaned into his touch, closing the final distance between them, and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. Her head found the crook of his neck, a perfect, safe harbor. Julian tensed for a fraction of a second, surprised by the sudden, unreserved contact. Then, just as quickly, his own arms came around her, holding her with a strength and tenderness that seemed to answer a question she hadn't even known she was asking. It was their first embrace, and the sensation was staggering. It felt like two lost pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. They held each other for a long time, far beyond what convention would dictate, beyond what could be expected of two people whose feelings were still undefined. It was not a hug of greeting or farewell. It was a hug of profound recognition, of surrender. When they finally drew apart, it was only enough to breathe. Their faces were inches apart. Maya could feel his warm breath on her skin. "You don't have to read any more tonight," he whispered, his voice an intimate caress. "Just stay. For a moment longer. Like this." Maya closed her eyes, allowing herself to be fully present in the moment. The warmth from the candles, the scent of jasmine, the solid presence of Julian holding her, it all fused into a sensory memory that she knew would be etched into her soul forever. They remained that way, in a silence that spoke volumes, their hands still clasped together. Time lost all meaning. It could have been minutes or an hour. For them, suspended in that perfect bubble of intimacy, it was irrelevant. The frantic beat of their hearts began to slow, finding a shared, steady rhythm. In that moment of perfect, quiet synchronicity, Maya knew her decision had been made long before she was ready to admit it. She no longer needed time. The fear was still there, a fear of the unknown, of leaving the safety of her routine, of opening herself up to new vulnerabilities, but it was now eclipsed by something far more powerful, the certainty that if she didn't take this leap, she would spend the rest of her life wondering what might have been. "I'll go with you to Chicago," she said, her voice barely a whisper, yet resolute. Julian didn't answer with words. His hands moved to cradle her face again, his thumbs stroking her tear-stained cheeks, and slowly, like a man approaching a long-sought precious treasure, he leaned in. Their lips met in a kiss that was soft, tentative, and full of unspoken questions and promises. It tasted of mint tea, of dried tears, and of a future just beginning. It was both a culmination and a commencement. The slim blue book by Henry James lay forgotten in Maya's lap. its dark story left unfinished for the night. It didn't matter. They were now writing a story of their own. She had spent the entire night awake, suspended in a state of delirious unreality, her mind racing through the landscapes of a future she hadn't dared to dream of just hours before. A new life in Chicago, a new purpose. She had told her mother about the job offer over their shared breakfast, carefully curating the story, omitting the kiss, the embrace, the raw, personal details of her connection with Julian. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Ma," she'd explained, her voice buzzing with an energy that felt foreign and wonderful. "I'll be working at a foundation for the visually impaired. The salary is better and the health insurance. It will cover treatments and specialists we can't even consider here." Guadalupe had looked at her daughter, her gaze possessing that maternal X-ray vision that sees past words and into the heart of things. "This job," she'd said slowly, "does it have anything to do with that man at the hotel? The blind man you've been coming home late for all these weeks?" Maya felt a hot blush creep up her neck, a silent confirmation that answered the question her mother already knew the answer to. When she stepped into the staff locker room at the hotel, the atmosphere was instantly, palpably wrong. The usual morning chatter ceased, as if a switch had been flipped. Every head turned in her direction. Brenda and two other housekeepers exchanged knowing, venomous glances. "Good morning," Maya said, her voice overly bright as she tried to project a sense of normalcy she did not feel. "Well, look who it is," Brenda sneered, a malicious grin spreading across her face. "How's your special assignment this morning, Maya? A little tired after last night?" The other women giggled, a sound like shattering glass. Maya felt the solid floor beneath her feet begin to tilt. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she replied coolly, turning to open her locker. "Oh, please don't play the innocent with us," Brenda said, stepping closer, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "Everyone knows what goes on in that penthouse. You're not the first housekeeper to get promoted like this, you know. Just the first one to keep him interested for more than a week." "You're wrong," Maya said, slamming her locker shut with a sharp bang that echoed in the sudden silence. "Mr. Croft hired me to read to him, that's it." "Read to him?" Brenda let out a harsh, disbelieving laugh. "Is that what the kids are calling it these days?" Before Maya could form a retort, Maria, the supervisor, appeared in the doorway, her expression like stone. "Suarez, my office. Now." The tone was non-negotiable. With her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, Maya followed Maria down the sterile service corridor to the cramped, windowless office where the cleaning staff's lives were managed. "Close the door," Maria commanded, sitting behind her grey metal desk. Maya obeyed, bracing herself for the inevitable impact. "Do you know why you're here?" the supervisor asked, her eyes hard and accusatory. "I can guess," Maya said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "But whatever you've been told about me and Mr. Croft—" "I don't care what you do or don't do on your own time," Maria cut her off sharply. "What I care about is the reputation of this hotel. We have strict, zero-tolerance policies about relationships between staff and guests." "There is no relationship—" "Save it," Maria held up a hand, silencing her. "You were seen leaving the penthouse at 1 o'clock this morning, and it's not the first time. The staff talks, Maya. Rumors spread. It looks bad." Maya's face burned with a toxic mixture of shame and indignation. "I just read to him," she insisted, knowing how flimsy the partial truth sounded. "He hired me specifically for that purpose. With no formal contract, no notification to human resources." Maria shook her head, her expression one of weary disappointment. "This is an official warning. If you continue with this arrangement, I'll have no choice but to report it to upper management. And that will almost certainly cost you your job." Maya opened her mouth to argue, to defend herself, when the office door was thrown open. The hotel's general manager, Mr. Harrison, stuck his head in, his face pale and alarmed. "Maria, you'd better come to the lobby. Right now." Something in his voice put both women on high alert. They followed the manager through the back corridors until they emerged into the magnificent, sun-drenched lobby of the hotel. The sight that greeted them made Maya's blood run cold. Julian Croft was standing in front of the main reception desk, flanked by the personal assistant who had arrived that morning from Chicago. It was the first time Maya had ever seen him outside the sanctuary of the 49th floor. His commanding presence, amplified by a flawless charcoal suit and his signature dark glasses, had cast an unusual hush over the normally bustling space. "I demand to speak with the general manager." His voice, cold and controlled, resonated with an authority that cut through the silence. "And I mean right now." Mr. Harrison scurried forward, nervously adjusting his tie. "Mr. Croft, a pleasure to assist you personally. How can I help?" "I have been made aware that one of your employees is being subjected to harassment by other members of your staff," Julian said, getting straight to the point. "Specifically Ms. Maya Suarez." Maya felt the weight of every gaze in the lobby. Receptionists, bellhops, guests land on her. She wished the marble floor would open up and swallow her whole. "I assure you, Mr. Croft, we will investigate any allegations of harassment at our establishment immediately," Mr. Harrison stammered, his professional composure crumbling. "I don't want investigations. I want action." Julian's voice hardened to the temperature of steel. "Ms. Suarez has been working for me these past weeks, under a private personal services contract that does not involve this hotel. What occurs in my private suite is not the business of your staff. And if I hear one more word of rumor, one more inappropriate insinuation directed at her, or if I learn that her position here is being threatened in any way, I will immediately withdraw every dollar of business my company and its subsidiaries conduct with the entire Apex Global portfolio." A profound, sepulchral silence followed his declaration. Everyone present seemed to be holding their breath. "Of course, Mr. Croft," the manager had gone white as a sheet. "I can personally assure you that Ms. Suarez has our utmost respect and support." "I should hope so," Julian stated flatly. "Now, if you'll excuse us." His assistant guided him toward the private elevators. As he passed by the spot where Maya stood frozen, Julian paused for a fraction of a second. Though he couldn't see her, he seemed to know exactly where she was. 9 o'clock, he murmured, his voice so low it was meant only for her. As always, when the elevator doors slid shut behind him, the lobby slowly exhaled. The manager turned to Maya, a forced sycophantic smile plastered on his face. "It seems you have a very powerful guardian angel, Mrs. Suarez," he said, his tone a strange cocktail of respect and suspicion. "Please, return to your duties. And Maria, you will ensure that Mrs. Suarez is not bothered again." The next few hours passed in a blur for Maya. She performed her tasks on autopilot, acutely aware of the curious stares and whispered conversations that now followed her everywhere. At precisely 9 o'clock, she rode the elevator to the top floor, her mind a chaotic whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Julian was waiting for her by the window, as always. "I'm sorry," he said before she could speak. "My assistant overheard the gossip and informed me of the situation. I could not allow it to stand." A knot of gratitude, humiliation, and fear tightened in Maya's throat. "You shouldn't have done that." Her voice trembled with a rage she couldn't contain. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? Now everyone in this hotel believes exactly what Brenda was insinuating. And why should you care what they think?" he replied, turning toward her. "In 2 days, we will be gone from this place." "It matters because I have to look them in the face every single day," she burst out, the words tearing from her. "Not all of us can live in a fortress, insulated from the world by money and power. Some of us actually have to face the consequences of our actions." A tense, wounded silence fell between them. "This can't work," Maya continued, her voice quieter now, but filled with a terrible final resolution. "We are from 2 completely different worlds, Julian. I'm just a housekeeper. Whatever has been happening between us, man, it's a mistake. A mistake." The disbelief in his voice was palpable. "You call what we've found a mistake? Because this stopped being about the books a long time ago, Maya. Don't pretend you don't feel it too." His words, so accurate, so impossible to deny, struck her like a physical blow, but her fear, raw and overwhelming, was more powerful. "I'm sorry," she whispered, backing away toward the door. "I can't do this." She fled the penthouse without looking back, leaving him standing alone in the silent candle-lit room. In the solitude of the descending elevator, the tears she had held back all day finally broke free. They were silent, bitter tears for the beautiful, impossible world she had just destroyed. The next 3 days were the longest of Maya's life. She requested that Maria reassign her to the lower floors, explaining that the incident in the lobby made it impossible for her to continue her duties for Mr. Croft. The supervisor, though clearly stunned by this turn of events, agreed without question. For the first time, Maya thought she saw a flicker of genuine compassion in the woman's eyes. The hotel became a minefield of sideways glances and hushed whispers that died the moment she approached. The story of the blind billionaire defending the housekeeper had spread like wildfire, embellished with fantastical details that grew more elaborate with each retelling. Maya threw herself into her work with a numb, mechanical devotion. The repetitive tasks of cleaning rooms, changing sheets and restocking amenities provided a strange sort of comfort. The routine was predictable. It was safe. It was nothing like the chaotic, painful emotions churning inside her. Every time the service elevator passed the 49th floor, she felt a sharp physical ache in her chest. She knew he was just a few yards away, perhaps waiting, perhaps wondering why she had abandoned him, or perhaps he had already accepted her verdict and was packing his bags, ready to leave behind the brief, foolish madness of their story. The nights were the worst. Lying in her narrow bed, she was haunted by memories, the soft timbre of his voice asking for one more chapter, the warmth of his hand as he brushed a tear from her cheek, the quiet intensity of his embrace that had demolished her defenses. Guadalupe watched her daughter with a worried heart. The vibrant young woman from a few days ago had vanished, replaced by a silent, withdrawn shadow who barely ate and spoke only in monosyllables. "You don't have to tell me what happened," her mother said on the morning of the 4th day. "But remember something your abuela always used to say: fear is a bad advisor, and pride is a terrible companion." Maya looked up, struck by the simple, profound wisdom. "It's not that simple, Ma. Love never is," the older woman replied with a sad smile. "But sometimes it's the only thing worth the risk." That morning, the hotel was buzzing with an unusual level of activity. Staff hurried through the corridors, and enormous floral arrangements were being set up in the lobby. "What's going on?" she asked Brenda, with whom she had reached a fragile truce. "Mr. Croft is leaving today," the other housekeeper replied, eyeing Maya's reaction. "He moved up his departure. His team is packing up the penthouse right now." The floor seemed to drop out from under Maya's feet. Today. He was leaving today. Without a word. Without a final goodbye. Perhaps it was for the best, she told herself. A clean break. She was finishing a room on the 7th floor when Maria's voice crackled over the intercom. "Suarez, I need you to go check on suite 8112. The guest reported a problem with the air conditioning." Maya headed to the suite, grateful for the distraction. When she opened the door with her master key, she found the room dark, the heavy blackout curtains drawn. And there, on the center of the perfectly made bed, was a single white envelope with her name written on it in elegant script. Her heart leaped into her throat. With trembling hands, she picked it up. Inside were 2 pages. The first was a typed letter. "Maya, I respect your decision to walk away. I will not try to convince you otherwise. I understand that our worlds are different, and I recognize that I may have acted without fully considering the consequences for you. I am returning to Chicago today. The job offer still stands regardless of what does or does not exist between us. You deserve the chance to build a life worthy of your talent, far beyond the confines of other people's rooms." The second page is something I wrote for you. It is in Braille, so you will likely not be able to read it. But I wanted you to have something from me that was made by my own hands, not dictated to an assistant or transcribed by a machine. These are the words I couldn't find the courage to say to you in person. If you choose to have it read, the staff at the Andrew High School Library can help. If you choose not to, I will understand that as well. With affection, Julian. The second sheet was thicker, its surface covered in the raised dots of Braille. The thought that Julian had created this for her, point by point, letter by letter, in his world of darkness, moved her to her core. She ran her fingertips over the patterns, wondering what words they held. She finished her shift in a daze, her mind torn between the certainty that she had made the right choice and the agonizing suspicion that she was making the biggest mistake of her life. After clocking out, instead of heading toward the subway, her feet carried her in a different direction. Almost unconsciously, she found herself standing before the iconic, lion-guarded steps of the New York Public Library on 5th Avenue. Inside the Andrew High School Braille and Talking Book Library, a kind young librarian smiled at her. "How can I help you?" "I have this," Maya said, pulling the Braille sheet from her pocket. "I need to know what it says." The librarian took the page, and her trained fingers danced across the dots. Her expression softened. "It's a poem," she said, "a very beautiful one. It's signed by a Julian Croft. Would you like me to read it to you?" Maya nodded, unable to speak. The librarian began to read, her voice soft and clear. In the quiet dark I live in, your voice is a color I had forgotten, a landscape I thought I had lost. They tell me I am blind, but that is a lie. Since you arrived, I have started to see again, not with the eyes I lost to the wreckage, but with a sense that is truer and deeper still. You see me. Not the billionaire, not the blind man, but the frightened, imperfect man hiding in the shadows. And should you ever choose to return, you will find me waiting, with a closed book in my hands, and a heart more open than it has ever been. When she finished, tears were streaming down Maya's face. It was more than a confession. It was an act of total vulnerability from a man who showed vulnerability to no one. She thanked the librarian and stumbled back out into the late afternoon light, the city blurring through her tears. Clutching the pages to her chest, she made a decision. The departures board at JFK International Airport showed that the 7:30 p.m. private charter to Chicago was boarding now. It was 7:28 p.m. when Maya Suarez came sprinting through the terminal. She had taken 2 subway lines and then a yellow cab, the fare meter devouring what amounted to nearly a full day's wages. But none of that mattered now. The only thought that consumed her, a frantic, repeating mantra, was the terrifying possibility that she was already too late. The terminal at JFK was a roaring river of humanity, families locked in tearful goodbyes, business executives striding purposefully with their roller bags, and bewildered tourists staring up at the departure screens. Maya's eyes scanned the sprawling lines of passengers, desperately searching for a single familiar silhouette in the chaos. And then she saw him. Julian was standing near a first-class check-in counter, his personal assistant speaking with the airline agent. Even from a distance, dressed in a dark suit and his signature glasses, he stood out from the crowd, a quiet island of stillness in the turbulent sea of travelers. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped in a way she'd never seen before. Maya froze, a sudden, paralyzing wave of doubt washing over her. What if he rejected her? What if this impulsive, desperate dash across the city was just a prelude to a final, public humiliation? But then, the words of the poem echoed in her mind, a lifeline in the storm of her fear. And should you ever choose to return, you will find me waiting. She took a deep breath and forced her feet to move. As she drew closer, she saw his posture change. His shoulders, which had been rounded in weary resignation, squared slightly. He turned his head just a fraction, as if he'd detected a subtle shift in the air. Maya wondered if he had somehow caught the faint scent of her jasmine perfume, or if his preternaturally sharp hearing had isolated the sound of her specific footsteps from the cacophony of the airport. "Julian," she said, her voice barely a whisper when she was only a few feet away. He turned fully toward the sound of her voice, his face a mask of profound, unguarded surprise, mixed with something else she couldn't quite decipher. "Maya." He breathed her name, the sound almost lost in the terminal's din. His assistant, the discreet and efficient man she recognized from the hotel, gave her a single, appraising look before taking a few steps back, granting them a small pocket of privacy. "Your flight," she began, her words feeling clumsy and inadequate. "Delayed," he completed for her. "An hour. Some kind of mechanical issue." An awkward silence descended between them, a stark and painful contrast to the comfortable, knowing silences they had once shared in the intimacy of the penthouse. "I read your poem," Maya said, finally, breaking the tension. Or rather, someone read it to me. A faint, sad smile touched Julian's lips. "The Andrew High School Library. I thought you might go there." "Why did you move up your flight?" she asked, acutely aware of the curious glances from other passengers in the line. "Because I realized it was pointless to keep waiting," he answered with raw honesty. "I understood that I had likely misinterpreted everything between us." Maya took another step, closing the distance, entering the personal space that had once belonged only to them. "You didn't misinterpret anything," she said, her voice low but firm. I got scared. Everything was happening so fast, and then the rumors, the stares at the hotels. I felt so exposed, so vulnerable." A boarding announcement blared from the overhead speakers, momentarily punctuating their conversation. When it ended, Julian extended his hand, a silent, searching gesture. Maya took it without hesitation, her fingers lacing through his. "This is not the place for this," he said. "Come." He led her confidently through the terminal to a discreetly marked VIP lounge. Once inside the quiet, hushed sanctuary, they found a secluded corner where they could speak without being overheard. "I have something for you," Maya said once they were seated. Or rather, something I need to give back to you. From her purse, she retrieved the Braille poem and placed it in his hands. His fingers immediately recognized the thick paper, the raised dots he had so carefully embossed. I want you to read it to me, she requested, in your own words. The way I read to you all those nights. Julian seemed taken aback by the request, but he nodded. His fingertips glided over the dots, rediscovering each letter, each word he had composed in the depths of his loneliness, thinking only of her. And then he began to recite it, not as a mechanical reading, but as if the words were being born anew in that very moment. In the quiet dark I live in, your voice is a color I had forgotten. His voice, usually so controlled and professional, had a different quality now. It was raw, vulnerable, authentic. As he spoke, his face, usually a stoic mask, reflected the deep well of emotion behind the words. Maya watched him, utterly captivated, seeing for the very first time the man behind the billionaire, completely exposed, without any of his usual defenses. When he finished, they were enveloped in an intimate silence, a perfect echo of the ones they had shared during their readings. Sit with me, he pleaded softly, patting the space on the sofa next to him. Maya moved closer, her shoulder brushing against his. Julian gently raised his hands to her face. His fingers began a slow, meticulous exploration of her features, tracing the contour of her cheeks, the arch of her brows, the line of her jaw, as if he were creating a detailed, three-dimensional map in his mind. I want to know what it's like to see you with my hands, he murmured, his fingertips lingering on her lips, her eyelids. In my world, this is the closest I can ever get to sight. Maya closed her eyes, surrendering to the profound intimacy of the gesture. It was a caress unlike any she had ever known, not for its physical nature, but for the desperate, genuine yearning behind it, the desire to truly know her, to see her in his own way. You are beautiful, he said finally, as if he had reached a definitive conclusion. I knew it from the sound of your voice, from the way your breath catches when you read a line that moves you, from the sound of your footsteps when you enter a room. But now I can confirm it. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. Julian's thumb found it and gently wiped it away. You made me feel like I could still be read, he confessed in a whisper, that my words, my thoughts, my emotions weren't all just doomed to remain trapped in the dark. And you, she replied, her own voice thick with emotion, you made me feel visible, not like a piece of furniture in the rooms I was cleaning, but like a person with her own dreams and her own story. Julian pulled her into an embrace, one that was different from all the others. It wasn't a hug of comfort or passion, but one of mutual recognition, of profound acceptance. Their bodies fit together as if they were two halves of a whole, finally reunited. At that exact moment, the lights in the lounge flickered once, twice, and then went out completely, plunging them into absolute darkness. A power outage. The entire airport, it seemed. The sudden blackness was a startling, powerful reminder of the night that had first brought them together. It seems we're back where we started, Julian commented, a low chuckle in his voice. With one difference, Maya replied, pressing her forehead against his. This time we're on equal footing, we're both in the dark. The darkness has never scared me, he said. It's the isolation I fear, the loneliness inside the darkness. You're not alone anymore, she assured him, finding his lips in the pitch black. The kiss was soft at first, but it quickly deepened, becoming more urgent, more certain. It was a kiss of reconnection, of promises made and futures claimed. When they finally broke apart, Maya rested her head on his shoulder. What now? She asked. Now. You make a choice, he said. That plane will eventually leave. You can get on it with me, or you can stay. Whatever you decide, I will respect it. Maya didn't have to think. The choice had been made the moment she'd heard his poem. I need to go home to explain things to my mother and pack, she said. Can your assistant book me a ticket for tomorrow? Even in the complete darkness, she could feel the brilliance of his smile. Just then the emergency lights flickered on, casting the lounge in a dim, ethereal glow, but neither of them moved. They now understood that what bound them together wasn't the shared darkness of their reading nights, or even the books that had served as their bridge. It was something far deeper, far more luminous, the ability to truly see each other, not with their eyes, but with their hearts. Chicago received Maya with a crisp, clear sky and an energy that was different from New York's frantic pulse. It was a city of broad shoulders, solid and grounded, stretching between the vast expanse of Lake Michigan and the soaring steel and glass of its skyline. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of adjustments, a beautiful new apartment in the elegant Gold Coast neighborhood, the logistics of arranging for her mother's move, which she finally agreed to a month later, and the process of learning a new city. The Croft Enterprises Tower was a gleaming skyscraper in the heart of the city's financial district. On the top floor were Julian's corporate offices, and on the floor just below, the project that had been his driving passion for the past 2 years, the New Horizons Foundation. Julian guided Maya through the sprawling under-construction space for the first time. It was a masterpiece of accessible design, wide corridors, walls with varied textures for navigation, perfectly calibrated acoustics, and what would be the heart of the project, a library designed to hold over 10,000 volumes in Braille, large print, and audio formats. "I want you to run all of this," Julian said as they stood in the center of the main reading room. "The library, the recording program, the community workshops, everything." Maya stopped, overwhelmed. "But Julian, I don't have a degree in administration," she protested. "I didn't even finish college. I'm just—" "You are the most qualified person I know to understand the transformative power of words," he finished for her, taking her hands in his. "Degrees can be earned. The kind of passion, empathy, and insight that you possess is innate," she accepted. Over the next 6 months, she immersed herself in her new role, taking intensive online courses in library science and non-profit management, while simultaneously overseeing every detail of the foundation's construction. Her nights were spent sharing her progress with Julian. They still lived in separate apartments, a decision she had insisted upon. "I need to do this for myself," she'd explained, "to build something of my own before we build something together." And he, with the wisdom he had cultivated in his silent world, had understood completely. The inauguration of the New Horizons Foundation was scheduled for an autumn afternoon. Maya's nerves were electric as she conducted a final walkthrough. The space was magnificent, warm, elegant, and profoundly welcoming. The ceremony was intimate. Julian, impeccable in a dark blue suit, stood at the podium. For the first time since she had known him, he wasn't wearing his dark glasses. His grey eyes, though unseeing, seemed to shine with an inner light. "8 years ago," he began, "I lost my sight, but I lost something far more profound: connection. I sealed myself away in a world of calculated efficiency and emotional distance. The books I had once loved became cold, mechanical voices." He paused, his face turning toward the spot where Maya stood. "Then, nearly a year ago, during a blackout in a New York hotel, a woman's voice opened a door I had long since bolted shut." He extended a hand toward her, inviting her to join him. "I'd like to introduce Maya Suarez, the director of our foundation," Julian continued, his voice resonating with pride. "The woman who taught me that sight is not about perceiving light with your eyes, but about feeling the light that exists within words, within silences, and within people." The following year was one of intense, rewarding work. The foundation became a national model for cultural accessibility. Her mother, now receiving excellent care at one of Chicago's top medical centers, watched with pride as the insecure young woman who cleaned hotel rooms blossomed into a confident, respected leader. One evening, almost 2 years after her arrival in Chicago, Maya found a Braille note on her pillow, a familiar, intimate gesture in their shared life. The next day, she took it to the foundation. It was an address and a time. That afternoon, she found herself at the historic Fourth Presbyterian Church. Inside, Julian was waiting by a grand piano. "What is this?" she asked. In response, he sat down and began to play. The beautiful, haunting notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune filled the soaring, sacred space. It was the first time she had ever heard him play. "I haven't touched a piano in 8 years, he said, when the final note had faded. "I thought I had lost that part of me too." He rose and came to her, taking her hands. "But you gave me back the music, Maya. You gave me back the beauty." From his pocket, he took out a small box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring. "I don't need to see the world," he said, his voice soft and steady. "I only need to feel you beside me, to hear your voice every morning, to know that we will walk this path together, whether it is dark or light." Tears streamed down Maya's face as she took his face in her hands, the way he had once done to see her. "And I don't need the world to see me," she replied. I only need you to hear me, the way you have since that very first night." Months later, in a small ceremony in the Foundation's sun-drenched garden, the former housekeeper and the blind billionaire officially joined their lives. But they both knew their true union had been forged long ago in the dark, when a voice had begun to read and a heart had begun to listen. Darkness and light, finally in perfect balance.